my sweet peas and sugar dumplings. Welcome to another story time with Shining Nathan. Me, your gay auntie from TikTok. And I'm so glad you're here. And if you've followed me from TikTok, welcome. And if you found me organically, well, honey, sit for a spell and relax. Because today we're going into a world of fantasy as I read to you. Because every adult deserves to be read to every now and then. Now here's where you're going to pause and go get your snacks, a little something to drink, and get all cuddled up. Or you can set me down and listen to me read to you while you go about your day. Now today we're listening to a piece of fantasy and reading it, so I say, called Time and the Gods by Lord Dunsany. Now, before we get into this, Lord Dunsany was a contemporary of H.P. Lovecraft, and his full name was Edward John Moreton Drax Plunkett, who was the 18th Baron of Dunsany. Now, he was alive from 1875 to 1957. Now, this story takes place, does not take place, but was published in 1906. Now, he always liked to write fantasy that was larger than life and fit the typical narrative of fantasy. He was fantastic at painting a world of grandeur, and he followed the usual themes of fantasy like princesses and fairies, but then sometimes he would take a twist to certain other elements of fantasy, and I hope we get to see that today. Now let's get into this one. Time and the Gods by Lord Dunsany. Once when the gods were young and only their swarthy servant Time was without age, the gods lay sleeping by a broad river upon the earth. There, in a valley that from all the earth the gods had set apart for their repose, the gods dreamed marble dreams. And with domes and pinnacles the dreams arose and stood up proudly between the river and the sky, all shimmering white to the morning. In the city's midst, the gleaming marble of 1,000 steps climbed to the citadel where arose 4 pinnacles, beckoning to heaven, and midmost between the pinnacles there stood the dome, vast as the gods had dreamed it. All around, terrace by terrace, there went marble lawns well guarded by onyx lines and carved with effigies of all the gods striding amid the symbols of the world. With a sound like tinkling bells, far off in a land of shepherds hidden by some hill, the water of many fountains turned again home. Then the gods awoke, and there stood Sardathrian. Not to common men have the gods given to walk Sardathrian streets, and not to common eyes to see her fountains. Only to those to whom in lonely passes in the night the gods have spoken, leaning through the stars. To those that have heard the voices of the gods above the morning, or seen their faces bending above the sea, only to those hath it been given to see Sardathrian, to stand where her pinnacles gathered together in the night fresh from the dreams of gods. For round the valley a great desert lies through which no common traveler may come, but those whom the gods have chosen feel suddenly a great longing at heart, and crossing the mountains that divided the desert from the world, set out across it, driven by the gods still hidden in the desert's midst. They find the valley at last and look upon Sardathrian. In the desert, beyond the valley, grown a myriad thorns, and all pointing towards Sardathrian. So may many that the gods have loved come to the marble city, but none can return. For other cities are no fitting home for men whose feet have touched Sardathrian's marble streets, where even gods have not been ashamed to come in the guise of men with their cloaks wrapped about their faces. Therefore, no city shall ever hear the songs that are sung in the marble citadel by those in whose ears have rung the voices of the gods. No report shall ever come to other lands of the music of the fall of Sardathrian's fountains, when the waters which went heavenward, return again into the lake where the gods cool their brows, sometimes in the guise of men. None may ever hear the speech of the poets of that city, to whom the gods have spoken. It stands a city aloof. There have been no rumor of it. I alone have dreamed of it, and I may not be sure that my dreams are true. Above the twilight, the gods were seated in the after years, ruling the worlds. No longer now they walked at evening in Marble City, hearing the fountain splash or listening to the singing of the men they loved, because it was in the year after years, and the work of the gods was to be done. But often, as they rested a moment from doing the work of the gods, from hearing the prayers of men, or sending here the pestilence or their mercy, they would speak a while with one another of the olden years, saying, "Rememberest thou not Sardathrian?" And another would answer, "Ah, Sardathrian and all Sardathrian's misstraight marble lawns, wherein we walk not now." Then the gods turned to do the work of the gods, answering the prayers of men, or smiting them, or ever they sent their swarthy servant Time to heal or overwhelm. And Time went forth into the worlds to obey the commands of the gods, yet he cast furtive glances at his masters. And the gods distrusted Time, because he had known the worlds, or ever the gods became. One day, when furtive Time had gone into the world to nimbly smite some city wherever the gods were wearied, the gods above the twilight speaketh to one another said, "Surely we are the lords of Time, and gods of the worlds besides. See how our city Sardathrian lifts over other cities. Other cities arise and perish, but Sardathrian standeth yet, the first and the last of cities. Rivers are lost in the sea, and streams forsake the hills, but ever Sardathrian's fountains rise in our dream city. As was Sardathrian when the gods were young, so are her streets today, as a sign that we are the gods." Suddenly, the swart figure of Time stood up before the gods, with bound hands dripping with blood, and red sword dangling idly from his fingers, and said, "Sardathrian is gone. I have overthrown it." And the gods said, "Sardathrian, Sardathrian, Sardathrian, the marble city, thou hast overthrown it, thou, the slave of the gods?" And the oldest of the gods said, "Sardathrian, Sardathrian, Sardathrian is gone." And further Time looked him in the face, and edged forward towards him, fingering with his dripping fingers the hilt of his nimble sword. When the gods feared with a new fear that he had overthrown their city, would one day slay the gods. And a new cry went wailing through the twilight, a lament of the gods for their dream city, crying, "Tears may not bring again Sardathrian, but this the gods may doom, who have seen and seen with unrelenting eyes the sorrows of 10,000 worlds. Thy gods may weep for thee. Tears may not bring Sardathrian again. Believe it or no, Sardathrian, that ever thy gods sent this doom to thee, he hath overthrown thee that shall overthrow thy gods." How oft, when night came suddenly on morning, playing in the fields of twilight, did we watch thy pinnacles emerge from the darkness, Sardathrian, Sardathrian, dream city of the gods, and thine onyx lions loomed limb by limb from the dusk. How often have we sent our child, the dawn, to play with thy fountain tops? How often hath evening, loveliest of our goddesses, strayed long upon thy balconies? Let one fragment of thy marble stand up amongst the dust for thine old gods to caress, as man, when all else is lost, treasures one lock of the hair of his beloved. Sardathrian, the gods must kiss once more the place where thy streets were once. There were wonderful marble in thy streets, Sardathrian, Sardathrian, the gods weep for thee. I hope you enjoyed this telling of Time and the Gods by Lord Dunsany. As you can tell through this telling, that there's a lot of similarities between Lord Dunsany and how he's written this story and Greek and Roman mythology. And I think that's a wonderful juxtaposition that he has created, where he's created his own sort of pantheon of fantasy in this short story. And I think it's a beautiful thing of how we can take something that once existed, or still exists, depending on your perception of deity and gods, and take those legends and create something new. And I think that's the beauty of human condition, of human art and wonder and whimsy. And I think that we should all cling to that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this telling. And before I go, a special thank you, as always, to my followers on Patreon. There are far too few of you, Dan. That's okay, I understand. But I'm blessed to have you. And if you want to become a patron, consider becoming a patron and supporting me. It's my main form of income. Keeps my lights on, my rent paid, and my cat and my belly fed. Patreon.com/Shining Nathan for as low as $3 a month. I'd be greatly blessed and appreciate you. And you get to get these and many other goodies there. As always, I love you. Take care. And never forget to keep your will safe.